Welcome back to another episode of SVG On Demand. We're back with the At the Ballpark series. We have a pleasure now to be speaking with Ben Mertens. He is the Senior Director of the Mariners Productions with, of course, the Seattle Mariners. Ben, of course, first of all, what's the situation like in Seattle? How's the team? How's your staff? And how's everything out there out west?
Kristian, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. Things are good out here in Seattle. It's a beautiful day, but obviously this summer has been a little bit unique for us. The team is doing well. Obviously, we're dealing with some different circumstances than we would during a typical season, but our group's been able to adapt. Everyone's healthy, everyone's staying safe, and been able to execute so far.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So take me through the typical day, as typical as it can get right now in this season. After you have your breakfast, after you leave your house, your apartment, wherever you live, when you get to the ballpark, kind of take me through the routine and then, game day operations.
Absolutely. And I don't know how familiar with each league has different protocols when you come to the ballpark. And so for baseball, for some of us, it actually starts before we leave to come to the park. And in the case of, depending on what tier you have, in baseball, there's 3 different tiers. Tier 1, usually on-field personnel, players, coaches, those type of folks. Tier 2 are individuals who have maybe contact with Tier 1 players and coaches. And then Tier 3 is usually the rest of the support staff. And so depending on where you fall within that tier, there's different steps that you have to take. And so before you can even come to the ballpark, for some of us, we have to take our temperature a couple times to get 2 readings on it. You may have to fill out an app and find out if you have any symptoms or anything like that related to COVID-19. And if all that checks out, you're granted access to come into the ballpark. And then when you pull in, guess what? You kind of go through the same process again. And so you have your temperature screened again to verify that no new symptoms have popped up since you arrived. And once you get through all that hoopla and everything, you get to walk into the building. And let me just tell you, from working from home, it is nice to walk into the ballpark now and to see the baseball field. But it's a different environment. You come in, there's signs, there's new protocols all over the place. And that extends into the control room where we now have occupancy rates on how many people can be in the room, where people can sit. You got to, sanitize your hands before you come in. You have to wear a mask when you're in the facility, unless you're in a isolated room like myself at the moment. You can't see behind me, but in the control room, there's plexiglass dividing different positions. We've had to take positions that were typically in the control room, like our producer and our PA announcer, and we moved them into another part of the building just to keep that social distancing. And then there's also restrictions on when you can come into the ballpark and how long you can be here. So it's a different environment, but once you kind of get in your seat, it's kind of back to normal procedures to getting you ready for a game day.
So before the season started, when you found out Major League Baseball was going to go with the 60-game season, no fans, did you go with a little bit of a dry run to see how things would kind of play out, making sure you and your staff are all on the same page? How did that kind of work out?
Yeah, the opening day was kind of a moving target. And for us in Seattle, we knew initially that we were going to have probably a shutdown out here before the league had officially put the league-wide shutdown. So we were already starting to make changes and adapting to what opening day may look like for us. Was it going to be in Seattle? Was it going to be somewhere else? And then we kept on adapting and changing that plan throughout what would be the season, as we kind of heard different things about when we may start playing baseball. But when, late in June and early July, when we did find out that, hey, baseball was going to resume, one of the blessings of the season was that summer camp, spring training 2.0 was going to happen at the ballparks, at the home ballparks. And so that actually gave us an opportunity to come in and test things, to practice things, to whether it's an inter-squad game, simulating what we would do with the scoreboard, mess around with crowd effects, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point on here, but also trying to figure out the logistics of how does a room operate with half the staff that we usually would. And so we were able to use those as a way to kind of gear up for the season, but also just the nature of this year, into what you alluded to, whether it was virtually or in person, and most of the time it was virtually, we were all constantly having meetings and discussions about what do we need to do, what do we to execute our show, and whether that was running through a script and saying, okay, these are elements we need, or this is the staff we need, or coming into the ballpark and testing things. So yeah, definitely a lot of testing, a lot of conversation to make sure that we were ready to go.
Right. Okay. So we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of things, the elements on the video board. obviously, I'm sure it's changed. Maybe it hasn't, but who knows? How is the production philosophy looking like with the actual elements on the video board during a game?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you know, a lot of times people are like, well, do you have to do stuff on the
Right.
video board? You know, fans aren't in the ballpark. And obviously fans are the number one priority during a game here at T-Mobile Park, and I'm sure at any other facility. But, you know, we also have other audiences that consume what we do. And, you know, that can be the team on the field. And I think people would be surprised how much the players and the staff here consume what we do, or even use simple things like the national anthem or the starting lineups where because they're consistent in our show where they run, that they use that also as cues for themselves about, hey, this is where I should be in my game prep.
Right.
And so making sure that we were providing that consistency that they're used to. But we also know during the game that they look up at the video board and they watch the mid-inning break content and making sure that we had that music and those elements for them. And then there's the other audience too that we also keep in mind, and that's the broadcast audience. If we weren't doing what we do here, the broadcast itself would sound different. If we weren't playing walk-up music, if we weren't doing claps or charges. And so you want to make sure that even though the fans can't be here, they're still consuming what the atmosphere is like at the ballpark through those other mediums of television or radio or streaming in some cases, and making sure that those experiences felt as real as possible and as normal as possible.
Okay, you alluded to a little bit, but we're going to go to the crowd noise. When the Major League Baseball, you know, bestowed the responsibility on you guys to help out with, you know, everything's a little bit different. RSNs are doing world feeds, national broadcasts are taking with the RSNs, but you guys are solely on crowd noise. What's the plan for that? When do you know if a ball's hitting to the gap to make it sound natural? When does your audio mixer know to slide up and make sure the noise is up? And also, you mentioned kind of the charges, the da-da-da-da-da. When do you know when to play that? When it's like, is it a 1-2 count, or kind of what's the audio scheme for you guys?
It's a great question, and it's not an easy task to do. So kind of just starting at the basic level, we have two audio operators. We have the traditional ballpark DJ who's playing the walk-up music, doing the typical sound effects that you would hear in the ballpark, the charges, the claps. And then this year, obviously, with playing crowd effects, we wanted to make sure that was a dedicated operator. So we have two positions, and they work in concert with our producer and other folks within the production team. And so kind of getting back to the crowd effects side of things, you know, it's for us, for what we do, and I'm sure others will say the same thing. Usually we're not running audio during a game of play. And so, you know, once a batter stops in the box, we have to stop what we're doing. And so it's a completely different mindset. And to do it well, you have to be paying attention to the game. You can't be checking your phone. You can't be having a conversation with somebody on comm, because you don't know when something's going to happen in the game of baseball. And so to that point, practice was the key, whether, as I mentioned earlier, during like our inter-squad games, just kind of get the sense and rhythm of a game, but also watching previous broadcasts and understanding what it sounds like on a game day. You always have the crowd murmur, right? And there's always that noise of the crowd, but that changes, of course, throughout the game and the situation, as you kind of alluded to. So we have different levels of murmur and crowd noise that we can play as a base. But I think what I think surprised all of us is you forget that once a ball is put in play, no matter where it's going, there's always a reaction from the crowd, especially the home crowd. It's like, oh, it's happened. So for our operators and with input from a lot of people in the league, you know, they have a series of sequence and steps that they go through. But, you know, there's your base crowd level, and the ball contact is made with the bat, and then there's an initial reaction there. And then depending on where that ball is going, they may, hey, if it's going deep down the line, hey, you may get a little rise of the crowd kind of building with anticipation. And if the ball ends up staying fair, you may get that eruption of it being a home run sound of cheers and hooting and hollering. But then if that ball accidentally hooks foul, then maybe it's more the,
right.
So you can't, you got to be on it, because if like you're a second late or 2 seconds late, it doesn't sound natural for the viewer or for those in the ballpark. And so I really compliment our staff who's really gotten that dialed in. And then in regards to like sound effects and those type of things that we would traditionally hear at the ballpark, our philosophy remains the same. It's the situation that's driving that. If there's 2 strikes and, Marco Gonzalez is ready to retire the side and he gets 2 strikes, we're going to play some, what we call like our 2-strike noise and sound effects. And we'll probably accompany that with even graphics too. So if the TV camera's picking up, you see it. Or if it's a full count and we got a runner on scoring position and Kyle Seager's up the bat, we're going to probably hit the charges. So that philosophy really hasn't changed.
The season is a weird one, and now you have a couple of weeks under your belt. How have things kind of changed? And to follow up with that, when have you had time to kind of sit down with your crew? Have you had time to sit down with your crew and say, hey, this works, this doesn't work, maybe we switch things up here? How has it kind of differed since opening day?
Yeah, there's definitely been real-time reaction to, okay, can we make this adjustment on the fly? And then there's other things that, we've set up time afterwards. And after this first homestand, it's funny, we're starting the season with 10 games. So that will be a third of our home season out of the gate. And so because of that, we want to react as quickly as possible. But we do have people out in the stands, just to kind of give you an example, Kristian, of listening to the crowd effect, saying, okay, the level sounds right. No, we may need to go a little louder. So those things we're adapting on the fly. And then there's other elements. For example, one of the things we're doing is virtual cheers, where Mariners fans have submitted themselves cheering, and we have different layouts for those. And we're kind of always discussing, when do those work the best? When do we use them? And so those have been a little bit more philosophy conversations. Kind of maybe a day or 2 later. And I'm sure we'll have more conversations after this homestand. But we're constantly talking, we're constantly evaluating, and we're adapting. And that's the big thing, I think, for this year, not just with game presentation, but with everything, just adapting and doing the best with what we have to work with.
Right. Okay, before my final question, I have to ask about the seat fleet and the cutout fans. Are they playing a role in the in-venue kind of experience, even though they're not inside of the ballpark, the actual fan?
They definitely are, and it's interesting. They're playing the role of just actually providing texture. I mean, it's right. Amazing when we go back and look at some highlights. And I was looking at some stuff that we shot with one of our internal cameras, and you're focused on the subject matter in the batter's box, and with the depth of the field on the camera, it looks like there's fans back there because it's like green. So from a footage perspective, sometimes it's kind of nice. But yeah, they're helping out in different ways, and I mean that kind of jokingly. But if a foul ball goes and hits one of them directly on the fly, we do send the foul ball off to the fan. They have a little spring to them. One hit one the other day, and I kid you not, it sprung off the cutout back onto the field.
Got some buoyancy to it, a little bit of give.
A little flex and shot it back to the field. But we're doing some silly things too, just like 17 stretch. We'll go out and shoot the cardboard cutouts and put them up underneath our lyrics. But we also have some fun folks in there. There's traditional Mariners game entertainment elements. We have an individual we call the Bad Dancer. It's a person, it's a fan, lifelong fan who shows up at the ballpark occasionally in the right field seats, and if we ever put a camera on him, he would just dance badly. And so we made sure that there's a cardboard cutout of that person in our right field upper deck seats, and so there's fun things like that too, and that just make a little highlights for us and for those who know a little bit about Mariners and our fans out here. So.
Awesome. Okay, last question. Live event productions is always kind of a thing that you have to be nimble and flexible and change on the fly, but this season, of course, is one of probably the hardest, I would think. I don't mean to assume, but your team, how proud of you of them? And, a couple shout outs for some key people on your staff that are kind of, getting the job done in this kind of odd season.
You're going to get me in trouble, Kristian, because I'm going to leave out a lot of people. But, yeah, the team has crushed it. And without them, we couldn't be doing what we're doing. And speaking of shout outs, and it wasn't, it was very sincere. Even after opening day, our skipper and our couple players in their post-game interviews, gave a shout out to the marketing communications team and for what they've done. But yeah, from Mandy Lincoln to Tyler Thompson and Greg Green to Eric Vaughn, Sam Finley, and Dan Oliskowitz, and so many others within the marketing and communication team, but have made this not rough, not challenging, but a unique season, so far successful. And to your point, now that we're getting a little time and with the new situation, I just can't imagine what we're going to continue to come up with and be creative with for the remaining part of the season.
Finding a bit of normalcy in a time where normalcy is hard to find. But Ben, first of all, I just want to give you guys huge kudos because what you guys doing is hard on a regular day. And now, like we've said enough, it's hard this season. So great job so far. Good luck to the Mariners. If Felix ever comes by, say the family says hello. But Ben, thanks for joining us today, and hope to see you down the road.
Thanks for having me on, and stay safe and stay healthy.